Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat. I'm super excited to be here chatting with you about my favorite thing, machine quilting. Plus, I have a giveaway, and you have 2 chances to win, so lots of fun stuff today. I'm going to be recapping the tutorial I just let out or released on Tuesday, and if you're watching live, you can leave your questions for Jessica. She's here as normal behind the camera in her adorable heart sweater. Answer your questions, monitoring the chat, and then not answer your questions, writing them down and giving them to me, and I'll answer them at the end if I can get to it. Like I said, we've got a lot of fun stuff to cover, and let's get right to it. We'll go right into the giveaways. So every once in a while I get a wild hair and I design a new panel, and so this is brand new. It is the whole cloth panel, and it looks like it's quilted, but it's not. It's actually a piece of fabric that looks quilted. So you can't tell here, but it's super cool. I took a picture of some thread painting that I did and kind of repeated it and created this cool kind of panel. So there's going to be 2 ways to win. If you're watching live right now, just leave a comment on here. Jessica will randomly pick a winner at the end. And if it's not live, leave a comment on the video and I will announce a second winner for the panel next live chat, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. Here you can see a little bit of the detail. I mean, it really looks quilted, but it's just a piece of fabric. And you know, like how now quilted clothes are really kind of in? You could use this for a project like that and get like a quilted looking jacket that's not all heavy. So super excited about this. So if you have more questions about it, you want to check it out, there's a link in the description box below, or you can go to quiltingismytherapy.com where it's on there. The panel is 42 approximately by 52. And so you can piece them together, make a backing. It's just pretty fun. I had kind of designed this and had it hang up in my studio. Gosh, it's been probably a year. And somebody came in and they're like, you should print those. And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, you know what, that's actually a good idea. So sometimes we just need a little encouragement from our friends to kind of kick us on down the road. So today, though, we're going to be talking about the Swirl Scroll. I'm going to try to say that correctly. There's a lot of tongue twisters with that, although somebody, I wish I wrote down the name, somebody called it the Swirl Squirrel. I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, the visual that brings up is pretty awesome. If you've never been to a live chat with me before, welcome. I really love getting on here and interacting with you all and just, hanging out for a half an hour on a Thursday and just talking about quilting. But we have just finished up a whole video series about quilting swirls. So throughout the 5 videos, for the last 5 weeks, we've touched on a lot of different things. And the last video came out on Tuesday, and it was about the Swirl scroll design. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of recap that video, answer any questions you might have about it or about free motion quilting in general, and kind of give you some examples of where you'd use this design. Now, the Swirl scroll is a design I don't teach very often. It's kind of amazing. I love the design, but it's not quite as versatile as maybe the elongated swirl or the swirl chain. But if you don't love echoing, or if you just want something that's more kind of stands out a little bit more, the Swirl Scroll is the way to go. It's, like I said, not the design you'll use the most, but every once in a while you need that kind of unique design to fit a certain area, and this is definitely it. So if you haven't checked out the video, be sure to check out that tutorial because I show you how it goes together. But I took a couple screenshots so I can just really quick talk through it. Basically, this design is quilted in 2 sides. We go up one side and down the other. One benefit of that is if I'm quilting an area, I'm going to come back to my starting point. As opposed to the swirl chain, which we learned last week, that's going to move me on to the other side. So one of the differences there. But it starts out almost exactly the same way as the swirl chain that we learned 2 weeks ago. That kind of elongated swirl. The only difference is, and this is kind of the hard part, I'm not going to keep coming back around the swirl. I'm going to stop right about this point and repeat. So it's kind of like this whole video series I've been saying, finish the swirl, echo, 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 and now I'm like, nope, stop, and go right into the next one. And so you can kind of see the 2 of them kind of put together there. So that's the basic shape I'm going to keep repeating through the area. Now, one of the questions that came up in the type chat before I went live was, how long do we make these swirls? And it depends on a lot of things. The machine you're using, the area you're filling in, your confidence with quilting those swirls. But if you need like a rule of thumb, I'm gonna say about yay big. Let's do like 4 or 5 inches. Again, it doesn't matter, but that's just kind of what mine end up being. And I'm gonna keep doing that. So, making my hill and my swirl, and then going right into the next one until I get to the end of my area. Now, this design has like a clear end point. So if I'm doing it in a bigger area, and we'll see this at the towards the end, I'm going to need to kind of get towards the edge of my area and then end it. So as I'm quilting along, I'm looking ahead of my needle, I'm seeing when that boundary is coming up because I need to then start working down the other side. Now, we'll see here in a second when we use that in blocks, it's kind of more important, but if I'm just quilting this across a big area, then I can just run completely off the edge too. But when I'm to the end, or it's time to work my way back, I'm gonna finish that swirl. So that last swirl is going to end, and I'm gonna echo all the way back around and then do the same thing on the other side. Here's the thing. This is like the caveat here. We're quilting that same shape, just a mirror image. And it's that flipping of that mirror image that can give us trouble. So if you are struggling with this design, try marking it out beforehand. It will really help. But here we can see I've quilted my swirl and I'm fitting that next swirl kind of where the previous hill is. And I know I'm saying a lot of words, but basically they're kind of cupping into each other on the other side. And then where I have my swirl on the other side, I'm gonna do my hill. So they kind of, like I said, kind of nest together and fit together like that. The hardest part, besides trusting that's gonna be okay, and quilting that shape, that mirror image, is I'm really trying to keep the spacing between all of the lines similar. That's what's gonna give it that scroll-like look and make it look like one kind of beautiful motif instead of individual sections. What makes this design so great though is you can mark it out ahead of time. We saw in the swirl chain last week that, you know, you could mark it out, but there's so many echoes and so many lines, it's hard to see where to go. But this one, I mean, it's pretty easy to mark out ahead of time, so don't be afraid to do that if you are feeling uncomfortable with the design. But it's definitely worth using because you can do it in a lot of different ways. Now, I'm going to show you some examples of where to apply those to your quilts, but I am aware enough that not everybody is going to love this design as much as I do. It's funny because when I teach classes in person, sometimes I'll throw this in and sometimes I don't. It depends on how the class is feeling or seeming at that point. But there are some workarounds. No matter what design you are trying to learn, whether it's a swirl, the swirl squirrel, or any design, try to take out the things that you don't like or change them. So in this example, what a lot of students that I've worked with over the years struggle with is that mirror image. It's tricky, especially if you're on a long arm because you can't just change the orientation of your quilt. So one way you can do it slightly different is quilt the first row as normal, right? So there's our individual pieces and you can just make them as long as you want, as many as you want. But then instead of doing the same shape on the other side, I'm gonna echo my way all the way back to the starting point. So we can see that first line echoing all the way back. That looks beautiful right there. But if you want that double-sided swirl scroll look, I can then work my way back up the other side doing the same thing. So I'm adding an extra line. I'm gonna end up, you know, towards the end of my swirl scroll, but I'll get the same basic look, but it might just be a little bit easier for me if I prefer quilting in one direction or instead of having to flip them around. So hopefully that will help. Now, when it comes to using this design though, like it's one thing to know how to quilt, it's a totally different thing to know where to use it on your quilts. And so in these like kind of recaps, I like to show examples of a design more like my persuasive argument to make you love it. So it's not so much like, hey, look what I can do, but if you don't like the idea of quilting that swirl scroll really big, you can shrink it down and use it in blocks. It is perfect for wedge-shaped blocks, those irregularly shaped blocks. Back in the day when I did a lot of customer quilts, improvisationally pieced blocks is perfect for it. The one downside of it is it does go out and back, so I'm not gonna wanna use this in a continuous thing. I'm sure you can figure it out. But in my mind, I want to fill a defined area. So I'm probably not going to use this as a border design that wraps around a quilt or a block, but definitely within a defined area like a little block right here. Now, this is one of the pictures that we saw in the video, perfect example of that swirl scroll in a Dresden plate block. Again, since it brings me back to my starting point, I can easily move to the next wedge and then repeat. So it makes it nice and efficient. And here you can kind of see I've alternated direction of my swirl scroll to kind of give it a secondary look. Now, with any design, it's not so much about making them perfectly the same, it's more about keeping them symmetrical. So if I quilt my swirl scroll so that it has one swirl on the left and two on the right, then I'm just going to quilt them all like that. Even if they're not the same exact size, it's going to look good. So don't stress out too much about that. And then we saw in the video, I just kind of quickly quilted some out and then showed how you can use echoing to fill in some of those gaps. And I just drew some wedges here. But some quilters might find it a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable within a smaller defined area. And in the example, I only have one swirl and then I have the end and then not really anything on the other side. So it doesn't have to be ornate. You can kind of simplify them a little bit. Again, you can change the direction or you might be like, whatever, Angela, I'm not changing the direction. It's hard enough to do it one way. But it's a real kind of fun design to use in that way. Now, we saw this last week as well. What you put around the designs that we quilt is as important as the designs themselves. I know some of you that watch my live chats religiously are like, we know, Angela. But when you're practicing, you have to remember that you're going to put some other stuff around it. Because when you just get the swirl scroll, you might be like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. But here we can see a quilted sample I just kind of whipped up for this video. I just quilted a couple of those swirl scrolls. And then once you quilt those, then you have to decide, do I want to highlight it or hide it? Do I want it to blend in? Do I want to show it off? Because what you're going to decide to put around it will determine that effect. So if you've quilted it, first I want to say, as you're quilting, you might notice that, my bigger swirls, my swirl scroll tend to have bigger swirls. It doesn't matter. Don't worry too much about that. Just swirl, come back out and echo. You will develop your own style. But if you've quilted it and you're like, oh my gosh, Angela knows what she's doing, we're going to put filler around it to show it off. So this is a picture after all the filler is quilted around it. I thought, I'll do orange. That'll be fun. Note to self, I'm never going to do a textured orange background. You really can't see too great. Anyway, if you want to show off your swirl scrolls, use some echoing around the outside to help separate it from the filler. Now, we're going to see, it's kind of interesting that we're going to use echoing to highlight it or hide it. But in this example, I'm using echoing all around it to kind of separate it from the dense filler I'm going to put around it. So we can see some swirls in between there. Now, I quilted the swirl scroll in a different thread color than the filler just so it would stand out. That's definitely not what I would suggest doing. I'm just doing that for illustrative purposes only. And same, I could just keep echoing as well. So on this other side, I just added echo lines to fill in the area. The reason that that helps highlight it is because the spacing between the echo lines are closer than the lines on the swirl scroll. So that kind of denser echo lines or that denser filler kind of squishes it down and lets that swirl scroll stand out. And so here we can see another example of those bigger swirl scrolls with the echoing and the filler around the outside. But if you quilt it and you're like, I should have maybe stopped at glass 2 of wine, or you want it to blend in a little bit more, then you can put some stuff inside of it. This example is, again, me trying to highlight it across a big area, and you can see the different fillers on either side. The lines are about 1 inch apart, so this was a bigger kind of more wow thing. I really wanted to stand out. And so using the filler around it and that echo lines helps separate it. But like I said, if you want it to blend in a little bit more, or you're doing crisis control, damage control, you can put stuff on the inside. And so in that main swirl scroll, I added some echo lines on the inside. And what that does is it makes the density of the lines the same inside and out and helps them blend in. Again, I'm using a different thread color in the swirl scroll so you can see what I'm doing, but I promise when you use the same thread color, you get that beautiful, beautiful look without it standing out so incredibly much. And here's another example. Now, do I think you should quilt a swirl scroll and then fill inside it with pebbles? No, but in this example, it was just kind of a quilted sample. I was trying this design in a lot of different ways, and I thought, ooh, let me echo it and put some pebbles on the inside. You notice it kind of blends in with the rest of the filler. So I spent more time, and it actually stands out less than it did before. That just kind of shows, keep quilting until you're happy with how it turns out. The joke I made, and I think I made this last week too, like, if it looks like crap, keep putting more crap around it until it looks good. And quilting is the only area that you can do that. It doesn't work with anything else, but definitely with quilting. So I didn't have a lot of pictures or quilted examples of this just because it's not one I use as much, and definitely I just didn't have pictures, but this is one of the first quilts I did for Tula, the Cartwheels quilt. And we saw the swirl scroll in the Dresden plates, but I also used them in the motifs between the blocks. And so you can kind of see that in there. This quilt is, 2009 is when I did that because I was pregnant with my youngest daughter. So the cell phone quality was not quite there back then, but you can maybe see some of those swirl scrolls. So you can use it as a motif. You can join it with the center bit, make it kind of a motif. I also love to use it to quilt through a big area. I don't try to turn the corner with it. I think I already said that. I'm sure it's not too hard. I just always avoided it. So if I have a big background area or just a big border, I can just quilt it right across the top. So really kind of a focal point there. And I don't have a picture of it, but since it's quilted in sections, you can kind of wrap it around. I wouldn't make it too drastic in the change of direction because you'll run out of room to put swirls on the other side, but just know that you can do that in some different ways. All right, if you're quilting along with me on the custom panel I designed for the challenge, I'm sure you've heard that a million times throughout the videos, this is where we finish up the rest of our quilt center. So if you need some kind of step-by-step or quilt this here, you can follow what I'm doing, or you can come up with your own stuff. It's totally fine. But what I did is at the bottom of the quilt, I just quilted a swirl scroll that kind of went around the corner a little bit and then put some filler around it. So not a whole lot of room to do anything too big and crazy. I didn't want to make it such a big part of the panel or part of the class because, again, I know not everybody loves it as much as I do. So very, very fun. And then you can fill around it with the filler of your choice. Now, real quick, I just want to talk just about quilt borders. If you bought the panel and you bought the border panel that comes with it, sometimes people want suggestions for quilting the borders. So if you don't have the border panel, then you can just, still use these two designs kind of for other borders. But here we can kind of see what those borders look like. Now, in a class setting like this or a series setting, if we're talking swirls, I try to keep it on point, right? So, or on topic. We're going to talk about swirls. But honestly, if I quilted so many swirls in the center of this quilt, I'm probably going to be a little tired of them. Maybe just a little tired, not too tired of them. But so I might do something completely different. But one way I thought would be kind of a nice option. Here's two simple options. The simple, it's all relative, right? Two options, I'll say that. There's so much going on in the center of the quilt. I feel like it's not necessary to do anything too crazy in the border. So that top option, you can kind of tell where I've stitched along the lines of the fabric in the geometric part and then quilted some swirls just in the rest of that area. What's kind of cool about this is if you were quilting this at the same time, those swirls could go right into the background fabric. You can just treat that as one big section, even though part of it's that light gray and part of it's the medium gray. But what I love about stitching along the fake lines of the prints is it makes it look like you pieced it, even though it's not. So it's just an easy way to kind of like make it look more difficult than it is. But like I said, with such a focal part of the center of the quilt, so much already going on, sometimes it might be nice just to do a piano key in those borders. And you can see that design idea number 2 in that picture. So piano keys are just straight lines that travel and then just echo. So it's just a nice design that just adds a pretty texture, nothing too crazy or over the top, kind of lets the design of the fabric shine through. And I also love how it kind of draws your eye to the center of the quilt. Now, of course, there's a million different ways you can quilt those borders. So I would love to see pictures, post pictures on the Facebook group of what you end up doing, because it's really fun to see the different examples that people come up with. And what's crazy is that kind of wraps up our 5 video series. So if you have quilted along with me and you finish your quilt, I hope that you're so proud of yourself. I know that it's so much more fun to learn quilting with other quilters, and it's kind of, I don't know, when you finish something and you go show it to a non-quilter in your life, the response isn't quite there. And they don't mean bad, they just don't know. So especially before my husband started working with me at our quilt shop, and he knows quilts, but he wasn't a quilter, I would say, Jeremy, I've got something to tell you. It's very good news. I want you to act appropriately. So sometimes you have to set the standard. But I hope that you're proud of yourself and you can cheer yourself on, because really, if you start from video 1 to now, you're going to see improvement. And if you haven't finished the videos, you're like, I haven't started, or I don't even know what you're talking about, Angela, no rush. There's no pressure here. What I love about the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Alongs is you can watch any of the previous ones. You can take them at your own pace. So just because I do it in 5 weeks doesn't mean you have to. So I hope super hope you're proud of that. And then if you are not sure what I'm talking about and you're like, what is this that you speak of, Angela? You can visit Quilting is My Therapy or click the link in the description box. It kind of gives you all the details. And plus, it's on my YouTube channel as well. So that kind of is the culmination of many, many months of work. And it's so much fun when I like post that last video. I'm like, So anyway, but don't worry, I'll be back. I'll still be here every week with live chats every Thursday. And then I'll be back soon with another video series. I cannot wait for that. But let's see if there's any questions about our Swirl squirrels. Love that name. All right. How far ahead of the needle is a good distance when quilting? Like, for instance, how far ahead should you look? Just an inch or so. Just like, I mean, I don't want to look on down the quilt. I want to kind of look just maybe an inch or two ahead just to see what's coming up. It's the weirdest thing to kind of get used to, but it really helps once you do. So I try, but I end up missing where I want to go. And that happens. You're just kind of, you're learning how to drive the car and drive the designs, and it's a lot of fun. All the things in the beginning, right? On the panel, did I put the swirl scroll on a diagonal or did I turn the corner? I put it on the diagonal. I just kind of quilted it like this in that corner. So it's just on the diagonal. Like I said, I don't love turning the corner with that. I just haven't messed with it a whole lot. Maybe one of these days I will. Is a new panel I designed blue or purple? So it's blue, but it does have a purplish tint to it. And then it has, like, I kind of edited the photo to have like a little bit of pink and so green and a little blue. So I wanted it to look like a peacock, but it's blue, more blue than purple. Wouldn't you say, Jessica? Yeah, she agrees. And she knows her color too. Mary Leffler, is that quilt bound? No, it is not bound. I don't think it is. If it is, somebody did it for me at the shop. It's so funny because we all know I don't love to bind. I do about one a year, so. Can I mention something about the borders? You have questions. So hopefully that helps, just kind of the pictures I've shown. If you have specific questions about it, leave it in the comments and then I'll address them during the next live chat. But really, like, the borders, quilting the borders for this quilt is a great time to just kind of do something that feels comfortable and relaxing so that you can kind of end on a high note. So, well, I hope you've enjoyed the live chat. Again, if you have questions, leave them in the comments. And if you like any of the videos I put out, I hope you'll give the video a thumbs up. That just helps YouTube know that you like it and helps other quilters find it. I mean, I don't want to do the like, subscribe, comment, but kind of like it, subscribe, and comment if you would. Appreciate it. And then a lucky winner for this is Sharon Spangler. And so Sharon, just email us at customerservice@quiltingismytherapy.com with your address and we'll get that sent out. Everybody else that's not Sharon Spangler, no worries. As soon as I end this video, just leave a comment on there and I will pick a lucky winner next week. So you have a whole week to enter, and don't forget to check out the links for all that stuff. I hope you all have a great week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and until the next live chat, happy